Hello, this is Annie Cameron speaking. We had originally planned for Bruce, Lorraine and I to present together from Wangka Maya in South Headland. Unfortunately, due to family and travel commitments, Bruce and I haven't been able to get to Wangka Maya this week. After discussion with Lorraine and Bruce, we decided I will present from Perth on behalf of the team. Firstly, we would like to pay our respects to the Noongar and Gariada elders, past, present and emerging, on whose country we're working. We're grateful to our colleagues at LDNA for their ongoing commitment to the preservation of endangered languages. We pay our deep respect and gratitude to the Pilbara elders for their language and cultural legacy, which they passed on to future generations. Just a little bit of background about each of us, so you can understand our context, connections to Wangka Maya. Bruce has been the chairperson of Wangka Maya almost continuously since it was established. He's produced a vast amount of language documentation through Wangka Maya for his personal use and for other projects and organisations. Lorraine has also been involved at Wangka Maya since it was established. She was the first Aboriginal language worker there in 1989 and has been the manager since 2021. She sat on the board during most of the years in between. I was first employed as a linguist at Wangka Maya in 2014. I have since then also trained in archives and records management and started a doctorate at Charles Darwin University. My thesis is investigating how the Wangka Maya archive supports language continuation. I've been the senior linguist at Wangka Maya since mid-2021. So you can see on this map the Pilbara language families and spoken languages. The Pilbara region covers about 500,000 square kilometres. And Wangka Maya, I think I said, was established in 1989 and it's been continuously operating since then. Wangka Maya, literally the translation, Wanga is language, story or song, and Maya, people translate it as house, but maybe place is more accurate. Language centres receive funding from the Australian government and other small grants, and some partnerships are developing with different Aboriginal organisations who have independent funding now. So language centres might be becoming less dependent on government funding. Wangka Maya is an Aboriginal controlled community organisation and supports local language and cultural activities which help to sustain language determination, autonomy and Aboriginal sovereignty in the Pilbara. Here you can see the language situation for Pilbara language groups. So in this table, in the strong column, there's 3 languages. They're the 3 Pilbara languages that are still being learnt as a first language by children. And in the column on the right is the languages that haven't been spoken for some time, so they're currently sleeping. The languages in the middle column are all at a severe state of endangerment, probably 20 or less people speaking most of them, and quite a few of them, probably 4 or less people at the moment speaking them. This photo is of Vincent Thomas. He's our Ulpridger language worker, and he's just reviewing some video footage that was recorded as part of our sign language documentation project. So even though the spoken languages are in such a state of endangerment, we're only just starting to document other forms of communication in the Pilbara. As the regional language centre and keeping place for material, Wangka Maya regularly receives requests from Aboriginal community members for access and copy of material in the archive. Often the material is requested for family-based language activities, and the person making the request knows that their family has left something at Wangka Maya. Requests might be for a particular story, song, or event. I'll tell you an example which captures the complexity of conducting a search in the Wangka Maya archive. I was at Wangka Maya and another linguist mentioned there'd been a request come in from a young community member looking for a song. The young person had dropped into Wangka Maya on their way past from another town. They were on their way to a community event. English is their third or fourth language. They requested material for a song in one of their first languages. The other linguist had a search in the archive catalogue for the name of the song, but there was no result. We knew that the song probably was in the archive somewhere, but that it would be difficult to identify and retrieve it. And we were glad that the young person that had come to Wangka Maya looking for the song, but we were very sorry we couldn't help him. Now, I'd happened to know about this community event from somebody else who had texted me recently. And I just, imagined that young person on the way to the event having that material with him and what it could have contributed to language activities at the event if we had been able to find it. Later on, I was helping Bruce set up his new laptop. He has been at the Language Centre since it first started in the late 1980s. We were talking about his collection of recorded material, and he was telling me how he wants to look after it for his grandson. He shows me some information that he's been writing down about his collection in his field notebook, his metadata, and auditions of his cassette tapes. Bruce described to me how he would like the information about his collection to be organised in his computer in his own languages, so he can find things without using English. One of the items in Bruce's handwritten metadata is a recording he had made of that very song that the young person had been looking for earlier. I told him, that young person was in here asking if this material was at the Language Centre. Maybe he knew that you'd already recorded it. I don't know what he wanted the material for. Bruce would know much more about it than me, with knowing what connection that the young person had to the song and the people in the old recordings. I was just sort of passing the message between them. The photo in this slide is Bruce at the top and myself practicing using Zoom just at the beginning of COVID in Western Australia, when we thought, now is the time for us to get better at communicating through technology in case we all get separated up. The experience of looking for that song was bittersweet. The project of language documentation had been successful. Documentation was serving a purpose in the current language activities in the community. The thing that someone was looking for was at the Language Centre, and we did eventually find it. However, it wasn't easy to find, and because of that we missed the chance for it to be mobilised in the community at a particular time where it could have had great impact. The complexity of locating a single named item through interactions with different people and technology led me to consider the Wangka Maya archive in terms of socio-technical assemblages. Dr. Kathy Bowe, in 2020, defined socio-technical assemblages as the heterogeneous sets of social and technical resources which perform and enable various types of language work. In the looking for a song story, the social resources were the people involved and their various relationships with each other and with Wangka Maya. The relationships meant information had been shared between people in different ways and to a varying level of detail. On the technology side, we had a cassette tape, possibly not yet digitised, handwritten metadata, communication facilitated by travel and text messaging, and an archive catalogue which doesn't have all of the information at Wangka Maya in it. These disparate elements at Wangka Maya interacted with each other in an unpredictable and dynamic way. There is also a spatial element to this story. Wangka Maya was established to be a central location for Pilbara language work. If people in the Pilbara are looking for language material, they'll usually come to Wangka Maya to check for it. The story involves somebody coming from a different location, me not being at Wangka Maya but being connected via text messaging. There was a community event that was also not at Wangka Maya, and then myself and the other people and the material located at Wangka Maya, and an archive catalogue located in a cloud. There is also a temporal element to the story. The events occurred over a number of weeks, with people coming and going from Wangka Maya at different times. This illustrates the temporary nature of assemblages. Pennycook describes assemblages as temporary arrangements which describe the way things are brought together and function in new ways. The coincidental combinations of people, technology and place over time resulted in eventually locating the song, although the opportunity for the assemblage to perform or enable language work had unfortunately passed. In discussing the Wangka Maya archive with Lorraine over the past few weeks, she really explained to me the extent of language documentation that had occurred, particularly in the late 90s at Wangka Maya. She said from 1996 to 2000, there were 23 language workers at Wangka Maya working every day documenting languages, recording and producing language resources. She said, part of the problem that we're facing now is just that there's so much language documentation there, and it happened so quickly. And during that time, the technology kept changing. So from the mid-1990s to mid-2000s, Wangka Maya language workers were using cassette tapes, then mini discs, then solid-state recorders, and other lesser-used formats, whatever recording device they could really get their hands on. During that time, the Language Centre sort of switched from using Mac desktop computers to Windows computers when it moved to a purpose-designed building. So that brought up all sorts of issues of formatting, conversions, and obsolescence. The Wangka Maya archive underwent a significance assessment in 2012 and a preservation needs assessment in 2014. So we're currently reviewing and implementing the recommendations from those reports in light of the things we've learned in the past few years through our own practice as well. Oh, this is just a screenshot. This picture is a screenshot of the record types in the archive catalogue. So you can see, there's about 1,500 cassette tapes, a lot of material, nearly 5,000 documents, I think. Here's some photos from inside the Wangka Maya archive room. In its current form, the archive is composed of many elements, including an archive room with a compactus of paper-based material, maps, posters, artwork, field notes, photos, some plant specimens, timber, stone and metal tools and artefacts, video and audio material on various forms of cassettes and discs, including many external hard drives, and a server with about 2 terabytes of born digital language material, Business administration is in a cloud-based SharePoint, and we also have a community research library that has about 1,000 items. The library items are catalogued in the archive catalogue. The archive room catalogue is cloud-based, and it's not a archive management system. It was originally designed as a database for humanities research. The language server is regularly backed up and it's geo-redundant, and we just use Microsoft File Explorer to navigate and use it. A few levels down, there are working folders for each language. These folders should contain all of the digital material for each of those languages. They've been split by format, so there's a folder for recordings, a folder for field notes, a folder for transcriptions, and a folder for projects that material ends up being in. If you want to find all of the documentation relating to one recording, you go through so many folders to put it all together. The information governance, consent, copyright, and access documents are stored in the business administration SharePoint. And audio cassettes that have been digitised were digitised at different times, in-house at Wangka Maya and professionally. So most of the cassettes have now been digitised, but the digital files are stored in about 3 different places on the language server. You have to look in all of them when you're trying to find something. The archive elements are spread throughout these many systems and places. Responding to a request like, may I have a copy of this particular song, means searching the archive room catalogue, asking staff and relying on institutional memory, searching the language archive server, and searching the information governance documents. To be entirely thorough, we should also explore unnamed or unidentified material and search in legacy collections which have been returned to the community and are mostly stored on external hard drives. As language speakers and learners increasingly rely on archival material, we are considering how to increase opportunities to form assemblages that perform and enable language work. It's connecting people and the information that's there in ways that are much more efficient. Enriching the archival context is critical due to the ongoing loss of language speakers. Our own work on legacy collections has given us very real experience of the challenges of recontextualizing material when the people and places it was created with are no longer with us. Some ways that we're enriching the archival context include reviewing and updating existing metadata with consistent and detailed information, restructuring the language server to be less fragmented, reducing duplication of files, checking and renaming unidentified material, improving our own data management practices, and updating our policies and procedures. Finer detail in metadata will enhance the possibility of alignment between socio-technical elements within the archive and the people using it. While the minimal structures were suitable when the collection was much smaller, it has now become so unwieldy to navigate. We're looking at implementing a more holistic management system, but we don't want to compromise that dynamism that's so important in producing socio-technical assemblages. We are also preparing to digitise all our non-digital material. This has given us a good opportunity to audit the archive hard copy material against what's in the catalogue. The digitisation process will create an enormous amount of data that we will have to review and store. Language centres don't receive funding for archive maintenance or employing archivists. We have a unique set of challenges due to working in a multilingual environment in which there are very few speakers of those languages left. Managing the Wangka Maya archive is a big responsibility with limited resources. However, this challenge is outweighed by the benefits of having a local community-controlled archive that can provide immediate support for language continuation. That photo, it was just in my office. There was a project, we had a project going that started off a recording Bruce had made in about maybe 1989 that had undergone all sorts of iterations to get this recording transcribed and then published as a storybook. It came to me when I started back at Wangka Maya last year, and it was one of the first projects I went back to when we were allowed to start working together in person after COVID. And the language specialist that I'd been waiting about 3 years to work with came down and put his hat on the table on this pile of this box of stuff that I was about to put into the archive. And in 90 minutes we finished that project, so it was really good. Ika, Chibi, Gala, thank you.